The American Revolution Events Chart, Part 2. So we're going to pick up where we left off after the Battle of Saratoga that had happened in the fall of 1777. What we don't discuss is that you have to understand that there is another part of the war going on that is down towards the Philadelphia and Pennsylvania area. Remember, General Howe was supposed to meet up with General Burgoyne, but he did not. He headed south and was successful in capturing the rebel capital in the fall of 1777 after two battles outside of the city, both of them losses by the American patriots. So in the fall of 1777, heading into the winter, things again do not look good. The Americans have now lost their capital. The American Congress has fled to York, Pennsylvania, and Washington has to decide where he is going to spend that winter. So what he decides is a place about 20 miles outside of Philadelphia, far enough away to not be a threat by the British, and also close enough to keep an eye on them. I'm hoping that you guys watched the videos that were embedded with your sheet concerning Valley Forge. Valley Forge is only about an hour and 15 minutes away from us down the turnpike. It is a place where no battles are fought, but it's very important nonetheless. Just because there's no battles does not mean that it's not important. Basically what happens there is the army is transformed. They have marched in basically as an undisciplined mob, fighting here and there for the last year and a half, but they're not really a trained army in the true sense of it. So they're going to leave as a well-trained fighting force, an army transformed over the 5.5 months that they spend at Valley Forge. These next pictures will just hopefully get a sense of what it was like. These come from Valley Forge Historical Park. These are recreated huts. They are not original to the time period, but these were windowless huts. Probably could sit or seat and house anywhere from 6 to 8 to 10 to 12 different soldiers at a time. Here you can sort of see, give a little bit more background as far as the snow. So it was a very cold winter, but really cold was not the problem at Valley Forge. It was illness, it was sickness, it was bad food. Basically it was just a struggle to make it through until the spring. Now, what really transforms the army is the addition of two foreigners that come in to aid the American war effort. So here we see Lafayette, and this is the way he looks later in life. He was a young 20-something-year-old aristocrat from France who went against the king's orders from the King of France to not leave France and join up with the Americans, but he did nonetheless. He left a wife who was with child at the time, but he was so inspired by the American Revolution that he wanted to become part of it. And so he leaves France, buys a ship, outfits it, and gets himself here to the American colonies in the middle of it, and joins Washington in those battles outside of Philadelphia. And he was slightly wounded in one of those battles. He's going to give money and support and be kind of a right-hand person to Washington. He looks at him as a father, and Washington looks at him as a son. Lafayette's dad had been killed even before Lafayette ever got to really know him at the age of 2. Washington never had any children, so theirs was a very close relationship for the rest of Washington's life. The other person that joins there, and we'll show this in class, is a guy that by the name of Baron von Steuben or Steuben. So what's fun is to look at these guys' real names. So the Marquis de Lafayette is a title. They just called him Lafayette, but this is his whole birth name. So give a try at saying that one to yourself. Maurice Jos Paul Yves Roche Gilbert du Monterre. That's my terrible French. And then here is my terrible German. So it's always fun to roll the R's. It's Friedrich Wilhelm Ludolf Gerhard Austin von Steuben. Okay, he was a drill master from the Prussian army. Yes, there was a king of Prussia. Okay, now he could speak no English, but rumor was he could curse in 3 or 4 different languages. Now the reason why von Steuben was so important is that he introduced drill, how they drill and how they are important on the battlefield to be organized, and he did that without learning a word of English. Okay, he had somebody, he spoke French, he spoke German, I think he spoke Italian, he spoke some Russian, and so the point was he came there and drilled the soldiers, and they went back and drilled their other people in their companies and platoons, and that's the way that this would work. And his drilling would work for more than the next 75 years in the United States Army as the basis of it. Just for fun, if you guys Google Guns and Ships from Hamilton, have some fun looking at that song. It's pretty good, about Lafayette and his role there at Valley Forge and the relationship that he had with Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton spoke fluent French. They got along well, very well. So let's move to the next guy, and that is John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones. Now, he is going to be one of the most famous naval commanders. There really wasn't a United States Navy at the time. So what they did is they outfitted ships that they called privateers, meaning you had a ship, you were licensed by Congress to go out and disrupt enemy shipping. Now, whatever that meant, you could attack ships along the Great Britain coast and sea line, and that was your job. So he is considered to be the father of the American Navy for his exploits during the war. So really what most of his importance is that he attacked British ships off the coast of Great Britain. Not too much action was taking place here along the American coast because that was dominated by the British fleet that was there. So here's an image of what John Paul Jones may have looked like at the time. One of the famous things, we've talked about a few famous phrases and sayings. His was, "I have not yet begun to fight." And this was a phrase that was issued or uttered after he was being bombarded by cannon shells and everything else. And his ship was so badly damaged, the crew basically said, they yelled over and they said, "Are you ready to surrender?" And he is, of course, rumored to have said, "I have not yet begun to fight." Now, the ship that he was able to get his hands on was actually procured by none other than Ben Franklin from the French, and it wasn't that great of a ship, but he named it in honor of Benjamin Franklin. Now, some of you may have heard of Poor Richard's Almanac, sayings of like a penny saved is a penny earned. And so since it came from the French, John Paul Jones decided he would name it Poor Richard. So this means Poor Richard in French. Now, one of his most famous engagements where he battled a British ship, which of course, like I said, was one of the best of the line, was the Bonhomme Richard versus the Serapis. And so you can sort of see right here, it's so badly damaged is that in the battle which the Americans win, the Bonhomme Richard has to be abandoned and the Americans take over the Serapis. So you keep track of that name. So in this battle, like I said, it was very hard fought, but eventually won by the Americans. We'll look at some of this kind of close-in fighting, and yes, they did kind of pull up right beside each other and fight it out between each other on the decks. So here would be sort of a scene of what it would look like as far as 18th century naval warfare. This next image comes from John Paul Jones' crypt, okay, his crypt, which is down at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. And that is where his remains rest today. So this is his sarcophagus. It's an above ground burial chamber. You can sort of see there's kind of like all this stuff all over it. It's very much a sea themed presentation. You sort of see dolphins and things like that. But if you look on the floor, these are the various ships that he commanded, and right there would be the Serapis that he took from the British at that battle. This would be just more of a formalized one, but it is kind of interesting. It is on the grounds of the United States Naval Academy, so there's always United States Navy personnel there on watch. I'm pretty sure it's 24/7, 365. So now we come to sort of the final large-scale battle of the war, which occurs in the fall of 1781. The war kind of stalls out in the northern part of New York and Pennsylvania. And so from like 1779 on through 1780, there's a lot of action in the South because the British shift their focus. They think that they can win the war if they shift the focus and try and secure the South. They feel there's more loyalists down there, and so their attentions move that way. But they don't really find a lot of great success. They have some places that they're able to capture. They're able to capture Charleston on the water. They're able to capture Savannah. So they're always able to control cities. But once they get into the countryside, that's where they sort of run into problems. So by the autumn of 1781, the major commander down there is Lord Cornwallis, and he has been chasing after Nathaniel Greene, who is one of Washington's right-hand generals. He sent him down there, and he's been doing the best of a bad situation. But what happens is they learn of some movement of the British. So what's going to be happening is the British are going to try and resupply themselves, and Cornwallis is going to move into this area of Yorktown on this peninsula. Now, some people are like, why would he go out onto a peninsula? Then he can't get out. But remember, the strength of the British is their navy. So he would move out here so that the British that are centered up here in New York could send down resupplies, resupply them, and he could continue his campaign. Okay? But the problem is, by this time, the French have arrived in full force. So they're up here in Newport. This is where Washington is most of the time. He thinks the major engagement to end this war is going to be for the Battle of New York. That's not the way that this ends. So what happens is the French were willing to join the Americans, but the problem was getting them here. The British controlled the seas, and so they would have to find a place that they could come ashore, and Newport, Rhode Island is the place. And so you can sort of see the one guy's name right here is Rochambeau. So the troops disembark here, but then there's another French commander, and he's going to be bringing the large siege guns that you're going to need if you're going to try and bottle them up down here. So in the videos you'll listen to and watch is that Army of Washington and Rochambeau quickly move all the way from New York through New Jersey and all the way down here in a matter of just weeks. And they find themselves able to bottle up Cornwallis with the help of Lafayette, and they begin what is known as a siege. Okay, a siege. So a siege is when you are able to surround your enemy, cut off all lines of communication and resupply. And once it is instituted, it's more of a matter of when it's going to end versus if it's going to end. So with the British cut off from the sea, the French and the Americans have this combined attack starting in October 9th and lasting about 2 weeks. So the British try and hold out, but they realize that this is just not going to end well. And so the British and American forces continue to fight, but Patriot forces move continually closer to British positions. And then eventually Cornwallis realizes that he doesn't need to lose any more soldiers, and he sends out a guy waving a white flag to basically end the bombardment. Sorry to jump around, but here in the fall of 1781, this is what it looks like down there. So you had the York River, and here you have the little town of Yorktown with British redoubts out here. So you can sort of see all these were British positions trying to stop them from getting in. And so the American lines and the French lines, they just continually move these positions forward, each time moving their guns closer. And so you can sort of see here in the back that the French have cut off the chance of the British getting away. So they have trapped Cornwallis's forces in Virginia, and they lay siege to Yorktown. So finally, in the last kind of hurrahs, these are these redoubts that are far out, and so when they take the last one, they realize there's nothing stopping them between this last British position and the main British force. So after that, what happens is Cornwallis surrenders. Now, what we know is this is the last major battle of the war. What they did not know at the time was that this was the last battle. They knew it was huge, they knew it was major, they knew there was thousands of troops surrendering. They did not know yet it was the last battle. So here in this picture, you can sort of see this is Lord Cornwallis surrendering October 19, 1781. There was a little bit of disrespect here. He did not come out and surrender. He claimed that he was not feeling well, and so he sent his second out. And so Washington back here, well, he sent his second out and said, you're going to accept the second, I'm going to send my second. So this is the surrender. And you can sort of see over here, these would be some of the Hessians. Also, this white flag is not a white flag of surrender. That's also the French over here. I'm going to go real fast here. So here it is, the Treaty of Paris, the official agreement that ends the war. It recognizes the United States as an independent nation and establishes new borders. So this is very key. So the new border of the United States would be the western part, would be the Mississippi, okay, and the Great Lakes to Canada. So there we are, the end of the war.